Hello my lovelies, so this is Lizzie from Love From Lizi, and today I'm bringing you the April 2019 10 cards 1 kit video with my April 2019 card kit. And here, first up, I'm just quickly showing you how I create all my card bases. Now, in the card kit you get 5 sheets of American letter size cardstock, and all I do here is I split it in half lengthways and then score it at 5.5 inches just to create a top folding A2 size note card. So I'm going to jump into card 1 here, and what I've done is picked one of the pattern papers that come in the kit, and I've marked using a pencil. You can obviously do this with measurements if you prefer, but I like to do this by eye, and then I just use my trimmer just to snip that out. I do alternate between using the trimmer and using a pencil and a T-square ruler and a pair of scissors. It just depends what's closest to hand. And then I've just used my Deluxe Nouveau adhesive to stick that onto the front of the card base completely flush. And I've taken another piece of pattern paper that has these sort of sentiments, and I've trimmed it to be slightly wider at one end and narrower at another, just for a little bit of interest. And this is one of the smallest cut aparts. This is 2 inches by 2 inches, and it's a circle emblem that says explore and discover your world. And I've just trimmed that into a circle around the edge, and now I'm using some peel-offs. As you can see, this sheet is a bit battered. It's travelled around with me a little bit, back and forth from the office and my home. But I've used the widest of the peel-offs available, and then here you're seeing me mitre the edges. So I lay them sort of crossing over one another, and then I push my blade in at a diagonal angle, and then it gives it a really nice finish, like on a photo frame. And here again I'm just flush sticking down that strip with the sentiment on it saying away we go, and I'm popping that at an angle, and again I use a peel off here, but I use the narrowest. And I've now picked up my Gathered Twigs oxide ink and a blending tool, and I'm just going around the edges of that circle just to give it a little bit more oomph, make it stick up from the backing paper. And I've picked one of the stickers here, which is a hot air balloon, and I've done the same with the blending tool there, just around the edges, just to make it stand up a little bit. And I've opened up my anti-static powder tool, which is one of the reasons that I really like this tool over the sort of the bags that you can get, because you can open it up and take a bit of powder out to sort of take the sticky away from the sticker and make it like an ephemera piece. And here I'm using the new Nouveau Crystal Glaze just to go around that outer circle of that little sentiment piece that I've popped up on some foam. And that was the end of card 1. Now we're on to card 2. And for this one I've taken one of the stamps from the stamp set, which is the Compass Rose. And I'm just using some Broken China Distress Oxide ink. And I'm just sort of twisting my stamp and working around to create a background. I do stamp next to one another so that I don't leave any enormous gaps, and I do make sure that at the end I go in and make sure I stamp off the edge of the page so that it looks like it's a bit organic. And here you're seeing me struggling with my left-handed scissors. I am trying to get better with them, and I am getting there. But I've taken one of the cut aparts, and I'm just going around the edge here with, again, that broken china, just to sort of blend it in a bit, because the nature of the papers in this kit are quite mixed media type. They're sort of layered and a bit rustic. Ink blending in different colours has really helped. And you've seen me use a pencil there just to draw out some lines on the specialty mirror cardstock that comes in the kit, and then I've die cut the sailing boat from the centre of that piece of specialty, because I'm going to be just matting on top of that so it's almost wasted, and then glued that down with the Deluxe Nouveau adhesive. And here I've just taken the green peel-offs. These are the peel-offs that come in the kit this month. And I'm just creating, in the bottom right hand corner, a bit of a diagonal stripe. I do end up completely filling that bottom corner. I'm popping some Scotch foam tape on the back of my sentiment panel, which says always take the scenic route, and sort of held my sailing boat up next to it to make sure that there'd be the space for it. And here you're seeing me cut some acetate and attach that onto the back of the sails. And the reason I'm doing this is because I knew that I would need to put some form of 3D foam behind it so it didn't sag. And I've got these Cool Tack clear, well, they're not quite foam, but they're 3D pieces, and I layer 2 up, one on top of the other, just so that it matches the depth of the scotch, and then attach a bit of glue where it's going to sit against the topper, the sentiment panel, and then I remove the backing and then pop that down. And here you're seeing me with the crystal glaze, the Nouveau crystal glaze, going over all of the lettering, so that it just has a little bit of shine and pulls it out from the background a little bit. And that's the end of card 2. Now we're moving on into card 3, and I'm doing a little bit of masking here. And I use once I've just applied the first piece down, I use the lines on my grid mat just to make sure that they are parallel to one another. And I'm taking that compass rose again, and I'm using Versamark ink, having anti-static powdered on the backing card. And here I'm using the Love From Lizi Copper Rose embossing powder. Now, of course, where I removed that masking tape, it did leave a little bit of adhesive, but I just used a brush and it just wiped off that extra embossing powder. And then heat set that up, and again I'm using the peel-offs that come in the kit, and just lining the edge where that masking tape was, and then running an extra strip along just for a bit of extra interest. And here I'm taking a tag die from my stash, and I'm taping it in place, and then I'm laying that masking tape over where I want the cutting to stop, because the tag isn't tall enough for what I want, but it's got a nice shape. So I'm doing some selective die cutting here, and then I'm taking the tag that I want to use and just drawing around the top and then extending up from the lines, so it's got the same shape at the top of the tag as the other tag that I'd like to use in the card, so it'll all work together well. And I use my pokey tool to pierce a hole, and then I push a pencil through that just to widen it up a little bit and trim off the extra. And I've taken the tag and removed the string from it and popped some masking tape down, and then taken the really tiny compass rose and heat set that also in the copper rose. And again, so that it matches in with the backing part of the card, I'm using a peel off, but I'm using a very narrow peel off here, and just doing a little double run there. And here you'll see me making that hole just a little bit larger and sort of laying it on top and feeding the twine back through. I did consider switching it up for one of the twines that was included, but I did actually quite like the simplicity of sort of the burlap twine. I've attached the key into it as well, and again I've got that gathered twigs on my desk, so I'm just running around the edges of the card base and the tag just to give it a sort of a little bit of prominence. And I'm popping some foam tape up behind my tag, and then just attaching that down onto the card base and sort of arranging the green tag how I'd like it to sit, and popping some glue behind it just to secure that down in place. And then I'm using some multimedia matte on the back of the key, just because I know it's a particularly strong glue, and then setting that down in place. And then next up, because I don't want that twine sort of flapping around, I use a mini glue dot just to attach a bit of that down, and then I'm using the crystal glaze around that little heart on that tag, and that's the end of card 3. Moving on to card 4. Gosh, I feel like I'm talking a million miles an hour. I'm sorry about this. So card 4, I wanted to create a layer on my card in the same colour as my card base, but I didn't want to stop myself from having my 10 cards with the card from the kit. So I'm creating sort of a sneaky window on the inside of the card. So I've cut some mirror cardstock to be slightly larger than the panel that I've just die cut, and that's just a journaling die that from my stash. And here I'm holding up that mirror board and using the light to mark with the pencil where I want it to be, so that the sentiment will be centered, drawing around the edge with the pencil, and then just snipping that out. And then once I've snipped it out, I snip off a very thin snippet off of each side, just so that it doesn't hang over the edge. And I pop some glue on, and I adhere that onto the back of the mirror card. Next up, I'm working onto the piece that was die cut from the card base, and I'm going to heat emboss the stamp from the stamp set, which is a little map that I've created. I use my anti-static powder tool just to make sure that I don't get any embossing powder where I don't want it. I use my Versamark ink pad, give that a nice generous inking, make sure it's pushed nicely into the corner, because it's a very detailed stamp. If you want to do a double impression, you need to make sure that you line it up exactly right. And here I am using the Love From Lizi Very Vanilla embossing powder, which was an add-on this month, and heat setting that. And when it comes to heat setting something as detailed as this with as much powder, I like to heat set from the back because it doesn't blow the powder into places where it shouldn't be. And here I'm putting a very fine layer of glue around the front outside edge of that panel, making sure that the sentiment will appear the right way up when the card is opened, and then popping that in. And here I'm taking just some of the little trees and the mountains, and I'm just in Versamark stamping those into the smaller islands just to give a little bit of interest. And then I take the sentiment Explore the World and pop that in my Misty and anti-static powder, Versamark, and then heat emboss that in Love From Lizi Silver Dollar embossing powder, just to match it in with that little silver mat that we're putting behind the journaling card there. And here I've taken some of the smaller little stamps, and on a sheet of acetate, which is actually the other part of the stamp set, I've laid those all down, and then I'm using an acrylic block and I'm just masking off. Now, if I'd have planned this card ahead of time, I could have done this before I'd stuck the silver piece on, and it would have made it a little bit easier. But I've just stamped that in Versamark just to give a little bit of pattern to that backer. Use some foam tape on the back of my journaling card and pop that straight on top. And then I've taken the white and silver twine and done a double wrap around the bottom of the card and simply tied that one in a knot. I then use a couple of glue dots just to secure it and make sure that it doesn't fidget about and slide off of my card. I do also pop a couple on the inside as well, just to keep them secure. And that is the end of that card. So it looks very simple from the outside, and on the inside you've got a nice little sentiment. So that's a good way to get more out of your card base. Card 5. So I've taken 2 of the pattern papers and the ivory card base, and I've cut a couple of strips, and I'm just adhering those down with my Deluxe Nouveau adhesive. It's got a really nice fine tip on it, which makes it easy to use, and it was on my desk. And here I'm using some peel-offs. Now in the middle I use the widest of the peel-offs available, and then to the right I'm using the middle-sized, and then to the left I'm using the narrowest of the peel-offs. This colour peel-off, this is brown, it did feature as part of the bundle that we released for this kit. And here I'm just cutting out 3 of these tiny cutter parts that work with the colour palette I've chosen. And here I've taken the gold mirror specialty card that comes in the kit, and I'm just marking on there in pencil where I want the lines to be for me to cut along. And then I've snipped those all out, and here I'm trimming the little cutter part that says Collect Moments, just a little bit at the top and bottom, because then that way on the gold backing piece I'm able to pop a peel off, and then also on the actual topper itself. And all I do is simply adhere these onto the gold squares with my glue, and then I fuss around arranging, having a little play, seeing how I want them to look, and then I flat glue down this one, which I do actually change a little bit, but I left it in there to show you that my cards are made very much on the fly. And then I apply some glue to the bottom corner of this camera one and a foam square to the top corner, and then I put foam all over the back of the one that's got the sentiment on Collect Moments at the bottom. And then I take 3 of my little clothes pegs and I attach 1 to each of these, which is why you can see I had to lift up that aeroplane one from the glue. And just to give it a little bit of extra support in case I pop it in the post, I did put 2 foam squares, one on top of the other, just so that it was a little bit stabilised. And that's the end of card 5. Now card 6, these dies people were very happy to have included in the kit, and that's what it looks like when it's all die cut. But I wanted to show you something else that can be done with it. You don't have to use them at face value. And this was a little bit fiddly, but I did really enjoy doing it. And I just snipped out all of the swirly pieces from the inner parts of the car, just to expose more and make the car more of an outline, which again lends itself to a masculine card, perhaps more so than when it has all of its swells within it. And so this is me coming to an end of having snipped out all those little extras. But the reason that I did this was I wanted to make a shaker card, and this would obviously expose more space behind the car. So that's all done. I had to double check that I couldn't do anything extra. And I've taken one of the pieces of pattern paper and die cut the car from it, just so that I could inlay my car. I've turned it over, got some of my acetate from my stash, and then just snip around the shape of the car and attach that on with a very thin layer of glue so it doesn't all splodge out everywhere. A tape runner would also be great for this, or an ATG gun, something like that. And then using some very small dots of glue, I attach my car onto the acetate so that it fits in nicely. And then using a pencil, I just mark around where I want the car to be positioned, and then snip that all down so that I've got like a card panel. And this is how I make my windows for my shaker. It's the same every time, but I get a piece of foam tape, I fold it in half using my fingers along the edge to make sure it's straight, then cut it into narrower strips. And by taking off the front and the back of the release paper, you can really manipulate this tape, as long as you've cut it narrow enough to get around all these funny little nooks and crannies of the car. It does mean that you have to lay your sequins onto your card base, so you need to have sort of a rough idea as to where they will fall. But I find this being the best method so that I don't lose all the sequins at the bottom of the card behind a part where there isn't the window. And then I just used double depth of the foam tape here, just to support the rest of that card panel, because it is paper as opposed to card. And then I use my anti-static powder tool just around the inside to make sure the sequins don't stick where they're not supposed to. And then here I'm laying a piece of twine in between the foam tape, so it's sort of sits in the gully. And I'm shaking some of my sequins from the little baggie from the kit onto the card front, and then I just attach that panel down, having removed all of the release. Then I tie a knot in my twine. It's just the little orange and white twine, which was the narrower of the two widths available in the kit. And here I've taken a sentiment sticker saying "Let's get lost" and stuck it directly onto some of the gold mirror. And then I'm piercing a couple of little holes using my pokey tool and popping in two of the very dark brown brads, just for a little added extra. I find embellishing men's cards a little bit more difficult because I can't go to my usual add a bit of sparkle, add a bit of shine. So this is how I get around that. And then I use some foam tape behind it, trimmed off those tails a little bit, and that is card 6 done. Now we're into card 7, and I've taken one of the largest cutter parts, snipped it out, and I'm just trimming down to be very tight to the wording. Away we go. And then here I'm taking a grey card base and I'm using the compass rose again, and I'm just creating a background. I find this little compass is going to be really universal. I'm really pleased with it. And then, having sort of twisted and turned and make sure I've gone off the edge, I've taken the globe sticker that comes on the 12x12 sticker sheet, tipped out some of the powder from my anti-static powder tool and neutralised that sticker. And here you'll see that I'm trimming down these words a bit further. I wasn't sure if I wanted them longer, but I don't. So, and then I've taken the plain die and cut that from the silver specialty. And here I'm just wanting to tie in a bit more of that silver from the plain. So I just drag quite liberally the edges of all of the sentiments in, and then heat set those. I do heat set them an edge at a time, just simply because if I tried to do all of them, I know that my fingers would knock some of the powder off, and it just made it easier. And then on the back of that now neutralised sticker, I'm putting some foam tape just to give that a little bit of lift. And then on away, I've put some glue in the centre at the bottom and then some foam tape around it, just so that I can stick that slightly over the top and it will all be supported. And then on the away, I'm popping some more foam tape and a little bit of glue, because again, that's going to sit slightly on top of the world. And then just foam tape exclusively on the go. And then I pop that down towards the bottom. And the aeroplane, because the majority of it I have over the globe, I sort of leave my thumb where it will be hanging off to make sure I don't put glue there. And then I put just tiny weeny little dots so that it's not going to splodge out of the sides. And that is the end of card 7. Into card 8 now, and this is perhaps my favourite card. Let me know which your favourite card is. I'm always interested to know, but I think the reason I like this card so much is I love this style of cards. I have about 1 million of them pinned on Pinterest, and I'm really very envious when I watch a YouTube video and someone so effortlessly puts one of these cards together. But I think where I'm naturally a clean and simple card maker, doing the cards that have different layers and different textures and things, it just doesn't come naturally to me. I like things to be organised. So anywho, I've covered off the whole card base here with one of the pattern papers, and I'm using my gathered twigs just to sort of smudge around the edge of that pattern paper and a little bit over the top. And I've cut 2 pieces of patterned paper here, one long strip and one smaller strip. And something that I was very aware of was how inky my fingers were getting, and I didn't want to touch my fingers in the wrong spot. But I was using a combination of the blending tool and dragging the paper into the ink pad as well, and it really splodged in some places, which normally would have me going, oh gosh, I can't deal with this, but for this card it worked. So I then chose another piece of patterned paper that I wanted to lay over the top of the small tag from the kit. And I only realised after I'd put adhesive on the back that I would struggle to get ink on one of the edges, so I dragged that through the ink pad and then did the same for all of the rest of the tag, again blended over. And then I chose the little aeroplane wood veneer and I just pressed that directly onto the ink pad and then set that aside to dry. And then on this smaller piece of pattern paper that I have here, I poked 2 holes in, which again for me, I love the rule of 3. So this was quite difficult for me, but I think it looks good. I think it works still. And I've just picked the grey and sort of like a tan brown, it's a lighter brown brad, and popped those in. And now I'm taking the compass rose and the gathered twigs again and just sort of twisting just to stamp over the top of that pattern paper. And here I'm trying to choose which embossing powder to use, and I decided to go with the copper rose again. Incidentally, they're my new storage tubs for my embossing powders and peel-offs, and they make things very easy for picking colours. But all I did here was I pushed my arrow into my Versamark pad, heat set it, and whilst it was still very hot, pressed it back into the embossing powder just to layer it up a bit. And here I am just gluing down that piece of pattern paper from top to bottom, and then I'm adhering down my little aeroplane, and I'm foam mounting the second piece of pattern paper, avoiding putting foam over the back of those brads, and foam mounting at the top of the tag whilst adhering flush on the back, as it were, onto the 3D layered patterned piece of paper. And then here I've taken a sticker and just snipped it down so that it will fit for my purposes, and it was quite white, so again I just got my blending tool and smudged a little bit of gathered twigs over the top, and then I've just stuck that at a bit of a jaunty angle. And to support it on either side, I just pop a little bit of foam tape under either end so that again it doesn't sag down. And I think that's the joy of these sorts of cards, is that could have been done, but then I was like, actually, I'm going to put a little sticker at the top there with that little plotter point, and then I attached down the twine from the tag using a couple of glue dots. And now that everything is all adhered after this arrow, that is pretty much the card done. However, I just wanted to add in a little bit more of that compass rose, so I didn't generously ink up the stamp. I just sort of loosely pressed it in and then pushed it around. And then with Versamark on the tag, and I popped some crystal glaze over one part of the sticker which says "Life is a grand adventure." And then also over that little plotter. And that's that card, and I'm so pleased with how it turned out. Card number 9. This is another cut apart card, so I used the Let's Just Go. And then I drew a very light pencil line around where that will sit on the card front, and it looks like a hot mess at the moment because it looks quite dark in the middle, but I knew that would be covered over, so I wasn't too concerned. I just wanted to have a nice soft little colour variation on the back. So I've used broken china and dried marigold, and then a very light touch of gathered twigs just to add some darkness into it and tone it down somewhat. And then I erase my pencil lines and then rub the gathered twigs around the edge of the cut apart again, just to make it pop that little bit, especially as I'm gluing it directly onto the card base. And then now I'm like, I've definitely got ink all over my hands, and I'm going to make this all a mess. And now I've got a rounded corner stitch die from my stash, and I die cut 3 times from the front of the card panel. And then I had to give the edge a little score again. And then I've picked another one of the pattern papers, which is a very light blue, and I die cut 3 of those out. And I've picked 3 of these little stickers that look almost like tickets, and I've just made them into ephemera by neutralising the back of them with the anti-static powder tool, and then popped some foam tape. To be fair, with the amount of foam tape that I put on these, you wouldn't need to take the stickiness away. The only time that I find it really crucial is if there's a chance that the sticker could get pushed down in posting and then stick onto the card front somewhere you don't want it to. Now here I'm lining these all up and using some painter's tape just to sort of loosely hold them in place, and then popping some glue onto the back of all of them. And this is, I've lined them up from the front so that it would look right when the card was closed it over, and then very gently peeled it up. And because the painter's tape isn't as strong as the glue, it's released and they are all in the right spot. And again, just using that gathered twigs on the inside edges of those square die cuts. And that is card 9. So card number 10, I wanted to revisit the stamp set that I've included in the kit this month. And my last card base was the alcohol marker friendly cardstock. So I was like, what better way than to end with a little bit of colouring. So I've used, this is Memento Grey Flannel. Now this is a dye ink and it's not recommended for Copics, but I had a plan, which was why I used my Misty. And I am listing the colours. This is BG 000, and all I'm doing here is simply filling in all of that C area. And once I've given that a nice good layer of colour, it sort of mutes the ink down a little bit, but fear not, if you're going to replicate this card, all comes good in the end. And then I come in with BG 00 just around the islands, just to give it a little bit more definition. I am no fancy colourist. This is simply just what I believe I'd like it to look like, I suppose. And then I come in with BG01 and then go very close around that coastline. And it just makes the islands look like they're coming up a little bit, gives them a little bit of shape. And then I blend that out again. And that's about all the colouring that you get for the sea. And I use my hex chart, which is a Sandy Allnock chart, and it is fantastic. It really helps me with picking my colours. I printed it onto my cardstock and then coloured it in so I know exactly how the colours will come. And this one, again, I'm just simply blocking in the island. And with this pen, the E35, I sort of go around where the island juts in, so where there may have been a bit of a landslide, and then I sort of drag those edges in towards the centre of the island just to give it a bit more shape, so that you're looking down on not quite a volcano kind of island, but it gives it a bit of body. And then I'm just going back in and blending that out again with the YR23, and I do the same for those on both of the smaller islands as well, on obviously a smaller scale. And here I get my YG67, and I'm just going around that very thin little border. And the reason that I picked that pen is it's very similar to the Nuvo drops that were in the kit this month, the bottle green. And this is why I love the Misty. I was able to put my card back in the Misty and re-stamp to darken up those lines again. And then I stamp it also in the same ink, Bon Voyage. And then I take a couple of the trees and the little church stamp, and I just stamp those on the island again in the same ink, just to give them a little something to them. And then once I've done that, I take one of the stickers which says Adventure, and it's got a very similar to blue to the colours that I used with my Copic colouring. And I made that into a topper, and there you see I cut my twine down, and just to save it from unravelling I wrapped a glue dot around the end of each end. And then I used glue dots to attach those down onto the front in the centre. And here I'm using some foam squares which I cut in half so that I can create a little gully in the middle, so that the twine can sit comfortably in between and the foam's not going to be fighting with it. And then I just use my tweezers to make sure that I get that exactly in the centre and over the top. And then here I'm using some Nuvo drops. Now you can do this with a pencil first if you'd rather measure it out, but I tend to do this by eye. And I start from the outer edges and then work in, leaving semi-equal spaces. And I repeat that on both sides. And then at the top I pop a dot in the middle, and then there's not enough to put 3 dots either side, so I just sort of eyeball it, and that's the end of card 10. So kit leftovers, there's lots of stickers, and the cutter parts, there's still almost a whole sheet. I only used 2 from that sheet, and that one I only used 4. So there's lots there. Lots of gold mirror board still. Also silver mirror board, more than half a sheet of each. And then I've got 3 complete sheets, and then these ones are still quite sizable. I've got lots left, and then these ones I've used quite a fair bit of. Obviously I have my stamp set, which is for keeps. My peel-offs I only used on a couple of cards. I've still got 2 tags, my Nuvo drops. I've got lots of twine. I only used 2 different sorts. Sequins, I've still got 7 wooden shapes, lots of pegs and brads still. Still got a key, and I've got obviously my lovely dies. So there's lots left if you're wanting to add some cardstock in and make some more. Additional supplies, I use my hex chart, my foam tape, trimmer, Misty, scoring board. I used various trimmers, to be fair. I used my die cutting machine, my heat tool, my oxides in gathered twigs, dried marigold and broken china. I used Love From Lizi embossing powder in copper rose, silver dollar and very vanilla. Various glues, adhesives, anti-static powder tool from EK Success, various scissors, tweezers, little snippy bits, pencil, my bone folder. I used my foam squares and my clear squares, blending tool, tapes. I also used 4 dies from my stash and some acetate, the brown peel-offs, some glue dots, my T-square ruler, my heat gun, and a few Copic pens, which I did specify at the beginning, but you can pause or zoom in and you can see which colours they are here. Thank you ever so much for sticking with me up until the end. I have got some still shots now for you. Please let me know which is your favourite card. The design team are crafting full steam ahead. There are a very small amount of these kits left in stock, so if you are interested, I suggest, if this video has only just gone up, you may be within luck. And some of the add-ons are still available. Most have sold out, but we are shipping on Monday the 1st, and I really hope that you've enjoyed this kit. And do check back and hit subscribe, because the design team will be posting their videos very soon. Thank you ever so much. Do take care, and until next time, happy paper crafting. Bye!